Welcome to week 6 of our Samuel study series. Today we have a little bit of a shorter video, but nonetheless, go ahead and grab your notepad, your pen, and let's go ahead and get started. Following after last week's video, we get to 2 Samuel chapter 2. Here, David actually does not assume the throne of Israel. Instead, a son of Saul named Ishbosheth assumes the throne. David is crowned king over just Judah. And what happens is a civil war ensues between the followers of Ishbosheth and the kingdom of Israel and David's tribe and his followers in the tribe of Judah. In 2 Samuel chapter 3, we find out something extremely disappointing about David. He has far more wives than we ever thought. He has at least 6 at this point in time. And he's having all sorts of children, and we finally get a comment that gives us a little bit of insight into the nature of these relationships. We actually find out where some of these wives came from, and we find out that they are foreign women, coming from other kingdoms and from kings. And this is explicitly against the commands of the Torah. Now we are starting to gain a little bit of insight here. And 2 of the sons that are mentioned actually will be important later. 2 sons that come from foreign families. Now, it wasn't exactly the foreign part that was the problem. It was the part about worshiping other gods and having allegiance to other kingdoms and other kings and gods. And David here is still presented as a righteous follower of Yahweh, but he has multiple wives, and this is a serious flaw that the author has really waited to present in fullness until now. In 2 Samuel chapter 4, we continue the graphic nature of these series of violent stories. However, David continues to keep his hands clean in the matter and is presented as someone who has high value for righteous people, which is unsurprising. However, Ishbosheth is murdered here, and at last, the final piece that was keeping David from assuming the throne is removed, and that brings us to our passage today. 2 Samuel 5, 1 through 10 is our passage today. Let's go ahead and read it. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "Behold, we are your bone and your flesh. Previously, when Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel out and in. And the Lord said to you, 'You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will be a leader over Israel.' So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them before the Lord in Hebron. Then they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 40 years. At Hebron, he reigned over Judah for 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem, he reigned for 33 years over all Israel and Judah. Now the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, and they said to David, 'You shall not come in here, but even those who are blind and those who limp will turn you away,' thinking, 'David cannot enter here.' Nevertheless, David captured the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. And David said on that day, 'Whoever strikes the Jebusites is to reach those who limp and those who are blind, and are hated by David's soul, through the water tunnel.' For that reason they say, 'People who are blind and people who limp shall not come into the house.' So David lived in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And David built all around from the Milo and inward. David became greater and greater, for the Lord God of armies was with him." This passage is sort of famous for having textual difficulties, which is really just a phrase that means the original language isn't clear. If you read multiple different translations of this passage, that will come to light. You'll actually get a lot of different variations of what happens here. But there is a general consensus on what's going on. It seems likely that though Jerusalem was well fortified and guarded, so much so that the inhabitants thought even paralyzed or blind people could protect it, David and his men somehow find a way inside the city. It's likely that it was through a water tunnel or through a cave, some sort of secret entrance, and then that's how they are able to get into the fortified city and take over Jerusalem. After capturing Jerusalem, we get the very first use of the word Zion in all of the Bible. And this is where I want to hang out for the rest of our video, discussing the word Zion. I think we take the title Zion for granted. There are a lot of uses of the word Zion in the Bible. and it's a lot bigger than what we'll just be focusing on today. But I want to follow a theme and an idea that is largely unexplored in contemporary circles today outside of the scholarly world. So yes, Zion is Jerusalem, but it's more than that. But I want to read two passages today that give us a little bit of insight to what is happening when a biblical author uses the word Zion. The first place I want to look is Psalm chapter 2. We're going to read verses 4 through 7. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he will speak to them in his anger and terrify them in his fury, saying, "But as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. I will announce the decree of the Lord. He said to me, 'You are my son. Today I have fathered you.'" I also want to read Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, a really neat passage that also brings up Zion. The word which Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Now it will come about that in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains, and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it, and many peoples will come and say, "Come, let's go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, so that he may teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go out from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, and he will judge between the nations, and will mediate for many peoples, and they will beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning knives. Nation will not lift up a sword against nation, and never again will they learn war." Reading these passages raises questions. It shows us that we need to have a little more of a nuanced idea of what Zion, or the mountain of the Lord, is. To begin this study, I will be borrowing some of the logic that I have been introduced to from the Bible Project, but also Who Shall Ascend the Mountain of the Lord, which is a biblical theology on the book of Leviticus by L. Michael Morales. It's an excellent book. I would highly encourage reading it if you ever get the chance. Once again, we are brought back to Eden. Eden is the archetypal spot for understanding anywhere where God exists. The goal of humanity is to be with God, fulfilling their calling, their purpose, in the space where God and humanity dwell together. That is Eden. Eden throughout the scriptures is discussed as a high place with water flowing out of it. God is there, humanity is there. It's a place of abundance. It is described like a mountain. Part of the language that I really like that the Bible Project uses is that Eden is heaven on earth. Now, this archetype of a mountain or a high place where heaven and earth meet, God is with people, or really it's just God's place, is actually a shared image in the ancient world. All sorts of other mythologies and religions use high places to describe where temples would be, where gods would dwell. The easiest example that might be most contemporarily available is Mount Olympus from Greek mythology. Now, this idea was not lost to the Israelites. Whether or not Eden was on a mountain isn't the point here. The point is that the place where God and humanity go to meet is described as a high place, a mountain in the Bible. And throughout the rest of the scriptures, the place where God is described poetically as a mountain, a cosmic mountain, or a heavenly mountain, from where God extends his rule over all of the universe, over every single thing, and sustains all of it. The idea is basically this. Mountains or high places reach up into the heavens. It's the footstool, it's the meeting place where the space of the divine touches earth. That's where God is. That's where God reigns. But it's not just any mountain, it's the mountain, the cosmic mountain where God dwells with people. That's Eden. And throughout the rest of the story, we see all sorts of places and spaces described using this type of language. So, let's put it all together. Jerusalem is called Zion. Now, Jerusalem could really be more described as a hill than a mountain, but it's in Jerusalem where the temple eventually gets established. It's in Jerusalem where the king, the extension of God's rule and reign, is founded. Jerusalem is an important city. It's almost as if in the imagination of the biblical authors, the prophets, the poets, instead of a hill, a physical city, they saw Jerusalem as the cosmic mountain where you go to be in God's presence. Through Jerusalem, this place that eventually has the temple, that has the king, that has God's presence, you get to be close to Genesis 2, Eden. There is hope in Jerusalem, also called Mount Zion, that the blessing of God will be brought to all of the earth, just like God promised to do through Abraham's family all the way back in Genesis chapter 12. So if Jerusalem is an archetype for Eden, then the king, following L. Michael Morales' logic, is likened back to Adam, someone through whom the authority, the rule, the reign of God is mediated so that blessing can be brought to the earth. This places a large amount of hope and emphasis on the king, on the city, in this case, King David. So through Jerusalem, Mount Zion, the mountain of God where God rules and reigns, we have the king. This Adam-like figure through whose rule we are supposed to see God's blessing and reign being established throughout all of the earth. This is idyllic. We don't ever have a king that truly accomplishes this in Israel, not until we get to the New Testament, of course. But we're jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit in the story. I just mentioned this because at this point, when David captures Jerusalem as a stronghold, establishes it as the political capital of Israel, and is inaugurated as king, this becomes the hotspot for all of this language. Mount Zion, the city of the Lord, the place where the temple will be established, the place where the king rules from. So many themes and hopes of God's people dwell here. Now, once again, Jerusalem is Zion, but Zion is not necessarily Jerusalem. Mount Zion is the place where God rules and reigns. And after Jerusalem is destroyed by the Babylonians, the prophets talk about Mount Zion, just remember back in Isaiah chapter 2, as if Zion isn't destroyed. It's more than just Jerusalem. There is an image here of God's place of abundance and rule, where heaven meets earth being established far after Israel is destroyed, and it's a place where all of the nations come to find peace. War is no longer in the land. This is a glimpse of the new creation. In fact, Isaiah ends with a glimpse of the new creation. It starts here with Zion, and it ends with God creating a new heavens and a new earth. So there's a rabbit hole here that we could go down. We could explore a lot of text where Zion is described, but what I really want us to gather today is this is the first place where Zion is used in the Bible. Jerusalem from here on out can also be called Zion or Mount Zion. In the idea of the ancient authors, this mount was the place where God's rule and reign was established, flashing back all the way to Eden, the mountain where humanity and God dwelled in the beginning, and God is reestablishing that here through Jerusalem and through the reign of David. There's so much hope placed once again in this Davidic figure, the king, through whose reign blessing will be brought to the earth. Surely great things are to come for David. Surely great things are to come for Israel, but we must simply keep reading to find out more.